Order. Please rise and join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Martha, please call the roll.
Davis.
Aye.
Flora.
Aye.
Inman.
Here.
Kring.
Here.
Quinn.
Here.
Rothrock.
Here.
Schlossmacher is not here yet. Thomas.
Here.
Thank you.
This evening we have a revised agenda to include an executive discussion for discussion of current litigation. I would entertain a motion to approve the revised agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the City Council approve the revised agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call roll.
Schlossmacher.
Aye.
Thomas.
Here. Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Rothrock.
Aye.
Inman.
Aye.
Kring.
Aye.
Flora.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Before we get through our agenda, I see we have some scouts in our audience. Would you please stand one at a time, give us your name, your troop number, and the badge you're working on, please.
My name is Jacob O'Brien from Troop 315 in Olathe, and I'm working on the citizenship and community merit badge.
Hi, I'm Isaac Lovell. I'm from Troop 315 in Olathe, Kansas, and I'm working on the citizenship and community merit badge.
I'm Sam Day. I'm from Troop 315 in Olathe, Kansas, and I'm working on my citizenship and community merit badge.
I'm Mitchell Thompson from Troop 315 in Olathe, Kansas, and I'm working on citizenship and community merit badge.
Thank you very much and welcome. Okay, on the agenda this evening, we do not have any public hearings, and we have no special presentations. We have no issuance of notes and bonds. So that brings us to item number 3, consent agenda. Information on the consent agenda can be removed. Any item on the consent agenda can be removed by a member of staff, member of council, or the public. Does anybody have a request to remove something from the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move the City Council adopt the consent agenda as printed, items 3A through 3F.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Davis.
Aye.
Schlossmacher.
Aye.
Flora.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Inman.
Aye.
Kring.
Aye.
Rothrock.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Under committee reports, if you have any questions regarding any of our committee committees, you can ask staff or bring it up under new business. Moving on to public comments, this is an opportunity for a member of the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda this evening. Does anybody want to comment on something not on the agenda? Seeing none, move on to item number 5, action items, Planning Commission. Item 5A is a Markway Mixed-Use Development Preliminary Site Plan 6005-60045 Markway Street. We have 2 items coming this evening from our Planning Commission. Ms. Sitzman will provide an overview first, and then we will hear from the developer, Christian Arnold. And then following Mr. Arnold's presentation, we will take an opportunity to hear from members of the public. So, Ms. Sitzman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd like to apologize for not being available to you at your committee meeting earlier this month. I appreciate that I was able to do something else that evening. I traveled to Florida and was able to see a launch at the Kennedy Space Center, which I highly recommend if you get the chance to go do that. I also apologize, I'm getting over a cold, so if I have a kind of scratchy voice, that's what's going on.
Or all of us.
Hopefully not communicable. So, as the mayor said, this is a case that's coming to you tonight from the Planning Commission. It's a preliminary site plan for property at 6005 through 6045 Markway Street. The subject property is currently occupied by 3 small office buildings. It's currently about a 1.8 acre lot. Those buildings were constructed in the mid-1960s. More recently, in 2014, the land was platted for the first time into 3 individual lots. That subdivision is known as Martway Office Buildings. That was done in anticipation of the then owner offering them for sale, which they did. The applicant tonight, Mr. Christian Arnold, recently purchased all 3 office buildings in those lots and is requesting a preliminary site plan to proceed on to a redevelopment proposal for the site. His proposal includes a mixed-use development consisting of 1 floor of retail and office space and ground floor parking with 3 floors of apartments above that. As you probably know from reading the staff reports, the project is located in the downtown district. It's bounded by the Rock Creek Trail and the Rock Creek. The building design is essentially a concrete podium on the ground floor with framed units above. The concrete podium is a construction type that has higher ceiling, larger spans to accommodate usually parking. The property is also in the floodplain, so there's a certain amount of flood proofing that would be required by our ordinances in order to develop uses on that ground floor other than occupiable spaces. It also is intended to provide clearance for fire district vehicles. The ground floor retail office space would be comprised essentially of 2 enclosed building areas for about 3,400 square feet. The remaining upper floors would contain 117 approximately rental units. That square footage is about 116,000 square feet. 2 public hearings were conducted and comments were received at the Planning Commission. They did hear the case twice. The most recent recommendation coming from them is for approval of the proposed development. They did include several conditions on their recommended approval. 7 of those have to do with conditions to address the required deviations requested for the project. There was an additional comment pertaining to traffic and stormwater drainage issues that still need to be evaluated. As I said, this is a preliminary site plan, so we start with as many details as we can. We have our consultant engineers review those, take a look at those studies that have to do with traffic and stormwater, but then always reserve the right to make additional comments on them as we get closer to a final design. So that's what that condition is about. We also reserve the right to provide additional staff comments on future plans about other aspects of the development like ADA, floodplain related concerns, and things. And then there's also going to be a requirement that the streetscape along Martway be designed to our city codes. We think there wasn't adequate space provided in their preliminary site plan for that, so we reserve the right to put them on notice that that additional space would be required with future plan submittals. So as I said, this is coming to you with a recommendation for approval from the Planning Commission. And I will make way for Mr. Arnold to present to you this evening. He has a presentation that he's going to give, and then we also have the plans available if we need to pull them up. Thank you.
I think we will ask questions later.
I believe the intent is to make the presentations, allow for a motion to be made, and have discussion. You'll also receive comments from the public before that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Christian Arnold. If anyone wants to question my commitment to this project, tonight is my 20-year wedding anniversary. So hopefully this will end well. And I can go home and,
Sorry you have to be here instead of your wife.
Okay. A few of you have seen this. A few of you are new, so I thought I would just walk through it quickly and talk about why we feel this will be a great project for the city of Mission. So what we're seeing is our neighborhoods are changing. There's an increased desire for walkable neighborhoods. With the demand that we're seeing throughout the metro area, 50% of people would like to walk to shops, services, businesses of that nature. Unfortunately, only 10% of those people live in those walkable neighborhoods currently. So what that means is to meet that housing demand, there's going to be an increasing demand on infill developments with a higher density so that all of the amazing work that's gone in on Johnson Drive, the city's investment, the private investment, and all those retail businesses, there's an increased density to help support those businesses. That's why we saw this as a great opportunity to create a project within a walkable neighborhood. To create that demand, tends to require a little bit greater density. You see over on the left, single-family homes, which are in the 4 to 10 dwelling units per acre. And then on the other side of that is apartments, which are in the 50 to 100 dwelling units per acre. The project that we're proposing is in that higher density. It's lesser density than what the Mission Trails project that was previously approved up on Johnson Drive is, and so we feel like we're right in that middle. Again, what this does is it creates critical mass, enough visitors, residents, people to support the businesses that are already in the neighborhood. I started my company 13 years ago. I know how hard it is for a small business to kind of get up and running. So it's a little bit of a soft spot in my heart to try to help other small businesses. It's kind of my mission in life. And it's not really just us that is in support of a project like this. This was an interesting article that came out. This was when the project was proposed at 5-story. There was an article or a poll that went out in the Shawnee Mission Post, kind of unbeknownst to us. I saw this after our planning commission meeting. And the public response was was overwhelmingly in support, and this was of the taller building. There were some concerns that came back from Planning Commission on that, and that's why we reduced the height of that and took a full floor off of the building. So we're trying to illustrate that we are trying to work with the city. We met with the staff in June of 2016 to begin talking about what to do with this parcel of land. So it's been a very collaborative process all along the way. So why do we like this area so much? I mentioned all of the great improvements that we're seeing on Johnson Drive. I also see things like the Mission Trails project that was approved. There was also, as you well know, there was a zoning ordinance that was approved last year that allowed for deviations from the zoning law to be allowed on a case-by-case basis. So all of those indicators were a good sign for us that the city was ready and supportive for a project like this. We love the fact that it's close to City Hall, it's close to the Aquatic Center, close to the park, right along the Rock Creek Trail. We really feel like it's critical to develop a high-quality project here. It might be a lot easier to come in and do more of a typical 2-story, 3-story walk-up type apartment project, like you've seen on the older side to the further to the east of Mission. But we really feel that due to the location and the closeness to all of the civic activities here, that a high-quality Class A building with Class A residents is really the right solution. Let's see. As you well know, the site is in a floodplain. So part of the Rock Creek TIF that was put into place a number of years ago was to promote private development to resolve this area. So as we started studying the site, we determined that the best way to deal with that floodplain was to get the building out of the floodplain. Seems like a good solution from our point of view. What that does is it pushes the building up, so we have the 3 stories of residences up on the podium out of the floodplain. We were also very cognizant of the fact that we had the city property in the park buffering us to the south, but there was one residence that's right here that our property was adjacent to. And so what we did was we designed the building to pull it away from that property line. There's a 25-foot setback requirement on the rear. The Rock Creek kind of absorbs that setback, and so that's why we felt that that was appropriate there. But on that corner where we are a little bit closer to that single-family residence, we pulled the building actually 76 feet from our property line to the building so that we created as much buffer as possible. So it's not like we were trying to kind of max out all of the property line issues. So we're trying to be very cognizant and aware and work with all of the constraints that we have on this site. These are hard to see on here, but there's a significant grade change. Here you can see is the Aquatic Center and where we are tonight. 61st Street is right here. There's about a 25 to 30 foot elevation difference between our site, which is kind of down in the valley, and the residents that are along here. And this kind of came up in the last Planning Commission meeting, that big level change, and you'll see later kind of a section diagram to illustrate that. really minimizes the impact of the height of the building. So because we are so much further down in that valley along the Rock Creek. Let's see if there's any other, I think you've all probably seen this. As Danielle mentioned, we are currently looking at 117 units. It's a mixture of 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. All of the parking is on site. Here's that, our property line is down here. You can see the corner of the building's been pulled far away from the existing office building here. And that's where you get that 76-foot dimension to that corner there away from the residences. Where it really gets a little close is right here. Again, the dimension from the property line to the other edge of Rock Creek is about 30 feet. So again, we still have a nice buffer there, but it is, that is one of the deviations that was requested just to try. We could probably extend this building out further, this side of it, and pull this one in and avoid any of those deviations. But we really felt like giving this building here and this residence here some breathing room was the appropriate thing to do. So these are the current elevations that proposed. The top of the parapet is 54 to 56 feet. That's right about the same as the Mission Square project. It's a full floor lower than the Mission Trails project as a point of reference for you. Here's a view looking south. You can see right there the building, popping up over the tree. Here's a view looking northwest. You can see the building there popping up over the top of the Aquatic Center building. This is that residence that we were trying to be as sensitive as possible, but you can see the building probably most from the yard of that residence. Here's the floodway and the chain link fence of the basketball courts, or the tennis courts. So you can see this was a study that we prepared for the Planning Commission just to illustrate the scale of the building. You can see here's Rock Creek. The residences are kind of clipped off this drawing. Here's the Mission Square project. You can see it's actually a little piece of it is taller than this building that we're proposing. The Mission Trails is up here, so when you kind of carry that line across, when you factor in the elevation change, it's about 30 feet shorter than the building that was recently approved here. This is a kind of a good illustration of that level change that I was talking about. So here's the residences along 61st Street. Here's 61st. Here's the trees and the park in between. And then here's the building in reference. So the top of the houses here is about right aligned to right here. So this building is just slightly taller when you kind of factor in the topographic changes at the site. Here's a view looking southeast with the neighboring buildings here. Some of the materials that we're introducing in color tones, we'll get into that as we develop the project in more detail. But we do want to. We visited with both building owners on each side. We're trying to get some materials to kind of connect through, but obviously changing the materials on the residential just to indicate that different use. Here's a view looking southwest of the building proposed. And then these are on 61st Street, a little bit further up. The building is not visible from either of these vantage points, but just as you can see, it's very heavily wooded. And then these were some conceptual images of other projects that we've worked on that would be indicative of the nature and the quality of the building. Again, what we're trying to do is develop a Class A building with Class A residents, which we think would be very conducive to this neighborhood. We would ask for your support and approval, the staff approval, the Planning Commission's approval, and your approval this evening. Any questions that you might have, I'd be happy to answer.
Why don't we hold questions till after we get public comment and then we'll have a discussion. All right, at this time, it would be appropriate for any member of the public to come forward. Please state your name and your address, and then let us have comments, please.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Wingert. I live at 6220 West 61st Street, which is the northeast corner of 61st Street in Lamar. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I lived in my home for 28 years. Moved there as a high schooler. My grandparents built that home. So I've been in this neighborhood a very long time. I bought the home from my parents after they bought it from my grandparents. Before I go off, I'm going to make clear that I support Mr. Arnold's right to develop this property. I truly do. I even support his right to develop it into apartments. I truly do. I'm excited about apartments, not one bit, but I support it. As it's currently proposed, I can't support it at all. So I have a number of concerns about the project, as well as the City of Mission staff and Planning Commission's positions and subsequent recommendations regarding this infill development. But first, let me briefly give my feelings about the development of apartments in general in Mission off my chest, and then I'll move on to those specific concerns about the market apartments. As a homeowner, I'm concerned about how apartments affect my property value, and I'm especially concerned when the City of Mission's newfound propensity to encourage and approve high-density apartment projects. I can substantiate that concern with data from the United States Census Bureau's American Community Survey, which demonstrates that in zip codes that have a higher than average rented to owned property ratio, property values average 13% or 13.8% lower than zip codes in the same county that have an average or below the county's, or average or below rental to ownership ratio. So 13.8%. That's a nationwide average, obviously. Will it be 13.8% in Mission? No, but averages are a median of high and low. So I think it demonstrates the impact that rental districts, rental housing can have on property ownership. Based on that, I believe that city staff and planning commission's encouragement of such project flies in the face of its homeowners' best interest. Mission has surpassed the 50-50 mark of rentals to single-family residences. And for a suburban community, I feel that's absolutely nothing that we should be proud of. Looking 10 or 15 years into the future, when the new wears off of our newest apartment projects, I seriously doubt that those apartments will be an asset to the community. So I'll get off of that and get back onto the subject at hand, the Markway apartments. And again, I want to reiterate that I support Mr. Arnold's ability his right to develop this property into apartments. So, perspective on what I just said there. So, a number of variances have been requested for the project. Some of them are where I take issue. I'll start with height and setbacks. This is an MS2 zone property. It's a transitional district between family and residential parkland and Mission's commercial areas. I feel that the variances, because of that, on a project that lands where this lands in that district are a tall request because of how they abut that parkland, residences, city-owned public space. As proposed, it's going to tower over a city park, the pool, a single-family property that it's immediately adjacent to. The plans show the first floor elevation of these apartments at the podium, the concrete podium, at about 17 feet above grade. My house would fit under that. That's a story and a half. So with 3 stories on top of that, at a proposed height of 56'3", we are talking about a 4-story building that is more like a 5-story building, essentially looming over our park, our pool, our residences. We're not talking about a 2-foot variance here, folks. We're talking about a 12-foot and change variance. If we were talking about a 2-foot variance, I promise I wouldn't be standing there, at least talking about height. We're talking about a complete departure from the ordinances of the City of Mission with the variances that are being requested. We're talking about effectively tearing pages out of the development ordinance. That ordinance was developed with the best interest of the community in mind. The proposed height is unacceptable to the entire neighborhood in and of itself, but is made even worse by the proposed elimination of the west and south setbacks. The developer, city staff, and the planning commission support complete elimination of that 25-foot required setback on the rear side. They're not asking to reduce it by a few feet. They're eliminating. They're using our park and Rock Creek as a de facto setback. Yet again, complete departure from ordinance law. The elimination of setbacks does away with the access for emergency vehicles through conventional means. When I say conventional means, I'm pulling up in a fire truck. There's a fire in the back of the building or a rescue that needs to be facilitated. Let's drive around the back side of the building. Yet here in Mission, Kansas, we're looking at a building that's proposed where the fire department has to drive underneath a building to facilitate a rear or side rescue on that property. That seems appropriate for Chicago. It seems maybe appropriate for downtown. It does not seem appropriate within feet of homes. It tells me that we're too dense. The setback requirement exists in part to soften the appearance of a project and helps keep it from looming over adjacent properties. My neighbors and I feel it should be rigidly enforced. The requested variance to eliminate the required trees kind of adds insult to injury. The architecture of this project would benefit greatly from a reasonable amount of trees on that south side. I do recognize the nature of the parking under the structure does justify a reduction of what is stated in the ordinances as far as trees per parking place. Some relaxation seems reasonable there. But Mission takes pride in its trees. This is a project that people are going to be looking at that, not just from the Martway side. They're going to be looking at it from the 61st Street side. Softening of the trees does not strike me as unreasonable. When we get on density, the requested variance on density. At the council session we had a couple of weeks ago, I heard a term in a 20-year construction career I'd never heard in the Kansas City area, which is in my travels, micro apartments. Micro apartments. And we talk about Class A residents. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years out. What is a micro apartment? Are we going to be bringing Class A residents into perpetuity in a project of that size? Proposed near doubling of the ordinance's density limits to 117 units ties directly to my aforementioned concerns of height and excessive building footprint. The city staff recommendation of the Planning Commission states that the density variance is, quote, necessary to make the project financially feasible and sustainable over time, unquote. And then it takes what I believe to be a sympathetic run at justifying the need for that density override in order to overcome the challenges with the lot. The developer chose to purchase the property knowing the challenges that are posed by building a floodplain, as well as the limitations clearly set forth by Mission's code and ordinances. It is not city government's role, in my opinion, to take a sympathetic position due to constraining circumstances presented by lot. When it comes to consideration of variances, Section 405.090, subsection E of the city's zoning ordinance states that, quote, any deviation from the requirement in the equivalent district may be granted by the Planning Commission and Council only where there is ample evidence that said deviation will not adversely affect neighboring property, nor will it constitute the mere granting of privilege, unquote. In all my thinking on this, I cannot figure out how allowing this developer to have an extra story, eliminating the setbacks, and nearly doubling that density does not constitute granting a privilege, because it's for profitability. At the end of the day, it's for profitability. I doubt that any reasonable person would think that granting these variances wouldn't be negatively impactful for nearby residential property owners or their property values. Mission's very thoughtfully written ordinances lay out a very specific dimensional guidelines and criteria that must be met by new buildings or developments. Those ordinances are as much law as the speed limit on Johnson Drive or the electrical requirements in the building code, and I contend they do not warrant the city's governance to give quarter simply because the developer claims to need it. Should the city's governance opt to relax the ordinances regarding development in certain circumstances, which we understand there's allowance for, developments that abut residential areas and public and parkland should be held to a much, much higher standard when variances are requested based on impact to nearby residences and areas meant to be enjoyed by the public. Finally, I'm concerned that the granting of a height setback density and tree requirement variances would certainly set precedents for development along Martway to the west and in similar locations throughout the city. Specifically to my neighbors and I, the impending redevelopment of the Mission Barn Players building. That abuts 2-3 property lines along 61st Street. Single-family residences, not parkland. But if we set precedent with this, we've set precedent. I implore you to remand this project back to the Planning Commission with a stern recommendation that they pay specific attention to the overall height and footprint of this project relative to the ordinance. Thank you for hearing my concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mary Ann Martins. I live on West 61st Street, and we've lived in Mission since 1993. And as I've previously stated, when I've appeared here, that growth and sustainability in the city of Mission, that my husband and I love, is most important and dear to our hearts. But I have some issues with this proposed development that I'd like to discuss with you. The city of Mission has a population stated to be 9,323 per Johnson County and Hub websites, with a 51.41% of housing units in Mission being rental units. As of July 2017, there were 2,827 total licensed rental units, with 2,493 of those located in multifamily structures, and 334 of those are in single-family structures. Rental units outnumber the single-family homes already. East Gateway has 101 rental units, known as the Wellstone Development. The Downtown District, which includes the proposed Martway mixed-use development, already has 520 rental units, plus 55 apartment homes owned by the residents in Mission Square. 200 additional units have been approved for development on Johnson Drive, 1 block north of the proposed Martway development. There are another 160 planned apartments for the East Gateway. The Martway mixed-use development requests to bring another 117 rental units apartments to the Downtown District, which would bring the total of high-density apartments and home-owned units to 997 in the small 1/2 mile radius, which encompasses East Gateway, Downtown District, and West Gateway. Remember, there's an additional 1,973 apartments, primarily located in and around Lamar and I-35. Adding the new units planned and proposed, this brings the ratio of high-density living spaces, homes, rental units to a 60 versus 40%. 60% high-density rental units to 40% single-family homes. How much density is too much? At what point do we overrun the city amenities of the Powell Center, city pool, city parks, and police? Have business owners in Mission approached either the city council or city staff requesting additional apartments be built in this area to supply homes for their workers? My other point tonight is regarding deviations and code variances requested by the Martway mixed-use developer. What is described as the back side of the building, the city staff and developer have requested that we allow a no 25-foot setback requirement to the south, as the Anderson City Park and Rock Creek provide sufficient green space, and Rock Creek provides a natural barrier. A barrier for whom? The people that live across the street or next to the park? Why is there no consideration for the current homeowners, residents, and may I add, taxpayers that reside next to and across the street from Anderson City Park swimming pool and city offices? Anderson City Park belongs to all the residents, and it is the most widely used of all the city green spaces. It should not be used as justification of green space for a developer wanting to build an apartment complex that cannot provide on its own a 25-foot setback that city code requires. The plans drawings look like the uncovered parking area and part of the apartments will be built right next to the existing north wall of Rock Creek. There is no screening, landscape, or ambience provided or planned for the back side of the building like there is the front side. But that is where your residents live and your children play. Let's remind everyone that Rock Creek is not some pretty scenic babbling brook. It's a concrete drainage ditch in a floodplain that requires fencing on both sides. And this drainage ditch runs 2/3 to 3/4 full with a hard 2-inch rain. Floodplains are named floodplains for a reason. Their tendency to flood. And not requiring a development to meet the required code specifications of green space surrounding a development in a floodplain can increase the chance of flooding. What's our liability on that if we do have a catastrophic flood? If Martway mixed-use development is to be built, it needs to adhere to the city codes, including density, height, and green space, along with adequate landscaping to protect property values to the back of the building and adjacent to the Anderson Park, and adequate parking for the property, including guests, visitors, to keep parking off the side streets. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, my name is Sarah Flogel. I'm new to this. My husband and I are new to Mission. We moved here 2 years ago, 5711 61st Street. We're actually on the east side of Woodson, so we aren't facing the proposed development, but we are affected by it, and I'll tell you why. So, although we are somewhat new to the neighborhood, we have come to enjoy the abundantly friendly neighbors and the countless amenities that surround our quiet street. We frequent the park with visiting relatives, play tennis, we have a summer membership at the city pool. We are quick to brag to our friends that we have found the sweet spot in Johnson County. A small town atmosphere, as my husband and I are both from small towns, locally owned businesses, a walkable community, and affordable housing. Pretty much a millennial's dream, although we are senior millennials. We are both excited about all the development happening around Mission. When we first learned of the Martway project that is just a block away from our house, we wanted details. I was surprised to find out that the developer had such grandiose plans for such a small lot, one that would tower over our wonderful park and forever change the neighborhood landscape to a cityscape. My main concern being that we don't face the development, but we are a block away and we do utilize the park, and we do enjoy our yard. Our concern is with traffic. When there are projects on Johnson Drive or Shawnee Mission Parkway and Martway happens to be backed up, we tend to get through traffic on our street. My husband is lucky enough to get to walk to work. He's just a 6-minute walk away, and he knows everyone on our street and the cars they drive. So he has been able to identify people who don't live in the neighborhood who also excessively speed above the speed limit. With this pending project, this would exacerbate the congestion that already exists on Martway and divert traffic to 61st Street. This development totally disregards the spirit of our neighborhood. It requires an acceptance of major deviations in order to be financially viable, and that shouldn't be acceptable, especially because it dramatically affects the adjacent properties, park, and the surrounding community. Building a historically depreciating asset next to a highly desirable neighborhood will devastate us. This transitionally zoned lot is supposed to provide protection from problems resulting from overdevelopment and excessive density. We hope to see Mission continue to develop and thrive through responsible development without sacrificing the spirit of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you for having us here. I'm Jennifer Coleman Richardson. I live at 6150 West 61st Street. In those pictures, that little house he kept talking about that butts up to it, I'm his neighbor. So my backyard is the backyard of these apartments. And let's just say, so my wife and I made a very big search for a house when we were looking to move. My 4-year-old is the little toddler back there playing and coloring. It was a big thing for us to pick the right neighborhood, the right space for him, the greatest schools, and so we picked this neighborhood. We love the trees, we love the walkability, and both being teachers, all summer long, that's what we do. We walk, we use those shops, we use those restaurants, we use it to its fullest. In having that apartment in the backyard, if that was there when we were buying the house, we probably wouldn't have looked. There's an apartment that's down Johnson Drive that was in the backyard of another one, and we did not look at that house because we knew that was not what we wanted for our neighbor. While I think an apartment is great, I've lived in very many of them in my life, and I think it's actually a wonderful thing to do there. The size of it, the fact that it's going to literally hulk over my backyard makes a huge difference for me. There is something that hasn't been talked about in this presentation, which I've heard is in the works, which is walking paths from that park to that apartment. We essentially take a city park, which my son loves, and walks to 2 and 3 times a day, and we turn it into an apartment playground. And that's not the same thing. That's something very different than what we signed up for 2 years ago. That's something that we would not have wanted, and that's something that will change the dynamic of our family city park. And so I really think that if this is something moving forward, if it's something going through, those things need to be taken into account because it changes the dynamic of this neighborhood. And this neighborhood is beautiful. I mean, look at the number of people that are here standing up for it, saying that it's something that's important to them. They're going to bat for it, not just for the money, though it will sink our property values. I've already called my realtor. The fact is, they're going to bat for it because it's the place they live, it's the place they love, it's the place they chose to be. And I chose it, and I want it to stay in that way that it is. Thank you.
What do you say when you have this many people? My name's Dan Aldrich. I just live across the street in the gray house. Thank you guys for coming. I want to point out, you guys all have a handout, probably with this sheet, and a 40 or more, actually more than 40 signatures of households or individuals. It includes 100% petition against this project from every homeowner and family resident on 61st Street, from Lamar, all the way past Woodson, and many all the way up to Outlook, to Sarah's home, and Dave, and Annette, and all those folks up there as well. So your community that you are representing is 100% against this project. Just the signatures are in front of you. You're welcome to talk to any of them. I've tried to keep this reasonable. What I would really like to see happen here is a relationship protected between us and us, the residents, and you guys residents who are serving. And trust me, I respect how much time you guys must be spending on council meetings and whatnot, because we've had to attend a number of these just to try and defend against this. So thank you for doing that. And I know you guys don't want to deal with this. Who would want to deal with something that has all this angst and whatnot? But that probably upsets me more than anything, that something like this could potentially damage the relationship we have with our own council and our own planning commission even. I think there's an opportunity here, a huge opportunity here going forward, where we're looking at an MS2 district, or we're a residential transition area. And if you go across Lamar and you see the green space by the driver's license bureau and all that, and the trail up in there, that's really kind of what all of us that live here for 30 years, 40, 50 thought, well, this is probably what's going to happen. In fact, at one point, I think they wanted to buy Aaron's home and turn it into a park or green space, didn't they? Years ago.
That's a whole other story.
Okay, we won't go there. But that's kind of what this area is slotted for, because it's floodplain. Nobody thought that we'd be looking at something that is 11 feet 3 inches taller than code, and we're pushing kind of business mentality into a residential transition area. No one thought that we would waive a setback away from our park and our properties of 25 feet, which, you know, is there for a reason. And for the fire department and the folks here, and Todd's here tonight, you know, that would be a great space for a fire truck to drive through. So you don't have to be 20 feet in the air on blocks. You know, there's a lot of opportunity here to make this work in a different way, or maybe we should just consider this type of a project with the density and whatnot. Maybe we've got another place where we can do this type of project and maybe use this for our green space, which we're running out of quickly with all the density we're adding. But I think it's a great opportunity to look at options that are not necessarily bigger, badder, better, and cram it into a little space next to people's homes. So if you're here tonight and you signed the petition, would you raise your hand? All right. So there are, I think you have 41. So I appreciate you guys coming out in the cold and doing that. I know these guys do too. You'll see outlined, we did say we really want to protect our park from being an overflow parking area for this apartment with bridges and things that go into it, to be I like the comment, from it being basically park space for an apartment complex tied to it. That's true, but we really are looking for that setback and the height to come down within code. If we stay in code, we're going to stay out of trouble. And I just appreciate you guys hearing this. There's plenty here to read if you want to read all the detail. It's all been said. There's a lot of emotion around this, and there is for me as well, living across the street from this park and seeing the great pool that we were able to do with the city, put in place for the kids. And, you know, all this noise, light pollution, density, right next to the park, next to people's homes, it's just not a good deal. And I know you hear us, and I appreciate that, but we're totally willing to make whatever solution work we can, as long as it's, you know, within reason for our community. I want to protect the community and not set a precedent for what's going to happen to everybody else around here in these MS2 areas. So thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Vicki Aldridge. I'm his wife. We live at 601 West 61st Street. Lived there for 27 years. Just want to clarify something that Dan said, because I think it's important to kind of know where the neighborhood stands. When we were both out getting signatures on the petition, we did find that we were able to get 100% of all the households between, as you said, 61st Street, between Woodson and Lamar. And so I feel like that's important, that every single person that we spoke with, and we didn't try to downplay it or upsell it. We just presented the facts, and every single home represented signed the petition willingly, gratefully, excitedly. We could have gotten a lot more signatures than we did if we would have stretched out even further. People were very encouraging, very supportive of the city staying within codes. So we stopped when we got to 100% of the most affected area and felt like that would be adequate for you. So I wanted you to know that we could have gone a lot further, and also not a single neighbor refused to sign it as well. So thank you for your time.
I'm a little late to the game on all of this and wanted to come and get information, and I'm more or less an impartial party in some respects. I do not live in your neighborhood, but I do have a business over here on Johnson Drive. Oh, sorry, Mary Warburton. I only yell with the studio, wherever that is over there. I actually lived in a home where this happened. I was in Olathe. We had a lovely horse pasture out behind us, and then one day we had AMC and Target. And I have to tell you, it was a nightmare having that light pollution, and I really feel for what they're saying with setbacks. I don't hear them saying they don't want this project. I hear them saying that please scale this back. And I get that, and I'm a business owner. I'd love for you to bring all those people to my business. But I think Mission has something unique that the rest of our cities does not have. You have a small geography that has a great community feel to it. I see that when I come into your council meetings. I see it when I'm walking around down here. And I hate to see you lose that. I think these people have a really valid point, having listened to what they're saying. And I'm also just a tad concerned about micro apartments. I'm not sure what that's going to attract. I know millennials want something small, but 400 square feet seems like a shoebox even for them. So I too would encourage you to consider some of the things that they're bringing up and not reject his project outright, but look at it differently and say, hey, maybe we should not give so much variance to this because we are now in our neighborhood. And these people bought for the reasons that they've come up here and stated. So as an impartial person, having listened, that's what I'm hearing out of this. So thank you.
My name is Brad Gregory, and I live on 5935 West 61st, right across the street from the pool. And a lot of the people have said the things I think all of us are thinking, the things that have our concerns. And I want to be really clear that no one is not for development. No one is not for development to be done in that mixed-use area. I think you're hearing it clearly. We just want it to be done according to the codes. We just want it. We respect that the people that made Mission the great city that it is to have the foresight to zone, to plan, to put ordinances that would protect us from ourselves from this very thing happening. And I've got to say, my outrage or my discontent is not with the developer, it's with the Planning Commission. How does this even get to this point? The things that they're asking are not deviations or minor variances. These are major things. Doubling up on the people, you know, adding another 20% to the height. These variances are for little things. These are not little things. And so it's really real simple here. Do we respect what the developers of this city, the people that came with these zoning and these things, do we respect the history of our city enough to say no when it's being challenged? Because basically voting yes for this means we don't care what they said. It doesn't matter. A situation is different. And my bigger fear is, what about tomorrow? What are we going to say to the next developer who wants to go 56 feet high? The fact that this property got bought by this developer with their, I'm sure, high-paid advisors, legal counsel, and all of these things, knew darn well what they were getting when they bought this. They knew it was mixed development. They knew what the density was. They knew what the height restrictions were. They knew what the setbacks were, and they bought it anyway. Whose fault is that? Not the City of Mission's. So I would love to turn this lemon into a lemonade for the developer, but please don't participate in this. It's not good. And thank you.
My name is William Wilson. I'm at one house on 61st Street. Yeah, it's going to be not exactly out my back door, and I'm doing renovations to my property so I can stay here for a really long time, I thought. With all the variances he's asking, I'm looking at a parking lot, and the very first time we came up here, he said the trash was going to be down by the police department. Well, it can't be in a floodplain, so now it's going to be up almost directly by my house. So that's what I'm addressing. It's going to be too tall, and being backed up to the creek, it's going to have trash, trash not everybody takes care of the property because there's no investment. So I'm going to have to deal with all of that in addition to the light pollution. What else was it? Oh, the traffic and what everybody else has said before. So, yeah, he knew what he was getting when he bought it. So I don't understand why we are the ones that have to pay for it in the long run. Thank you.
Hello. My name's Kevin Fullerton. I'm a resident at 5606 Outlook. I'm also a business owner, a Springboard Creative at 5600. I also happen to be the president of the Mission Business Association. And so over the last few months, the businesses, apparently I'm just talking to Merritt, so I will make sure to correct that. But the businesses have been talking, and we are in favor of this development as far as what he's trying to do. Because for one thing, our city needs to grow to be sustainable. You know, when we're talking about sustainability, things like that, our city needs to grow. We can't grow out. We have to grow up, or we have to add density. Really, we have to do both if we want to make this happen. And the thing is, as we look at what the future housing is and where it's going, a lot of the people now, maybe not the senior millennials, for example, but millennials, they're looking at apartments. They're not looking to necessarily move into houses. I don't want to say all, but that's where the trajectory is going with this kind of stuff. So if that's where the housing is going, so we need to provide that kind of stuff. And if we can build that off of Johnson Drive, we can build that off of our business community, then we have a nice, thriving, vibrant downtown that brings more businesses, that brings strong businesses to the downtown area. And that's good for Mission as a whole. It's good for the residents, and it's good for, we add neighbors, we add customers, we add taxpayers. We add all of those to the mix. And many of the things that we're talking about in this project, I think we've got some really great things in here. And when we're talking about deviations to the project, the thing we need to look at is, this is I don't remember the technical term for it, but it's a plain district. And a part of a plain district is it is meant to have deviations. It is meant to not be fixed into what the zoning is, because we need to give flexibility for what's going to change about the communities, what's going to change about buildings and things like this. This is a chance for people to be innovative. We've got a floodplain that we can't build much on right now, but we have a developer who is willing to come in and develop that property. And I think we need to stand behind that developer to do that. And there's many other opportunities we have. We've also talked, you know, some people were talking about, can we put it somewhere else? Where? We're going to have the same kinds of things. This is a good spot, this is a good use of the space, and I hope that you will consider this project. Thank you.
Lonely Valley.
Anybody else? All right, then we will close.
I might just offer a few clarifications that for some questions.
Let's go ahead and close the public comment portion. So the appropriate procedure, so the public comment portion is closed. So the appropriate procedure then is to ask for a motion to start discussion. We have a motion. We got to take action. So there's 1 to 3 motions that are possible. Yes.
I'll make a motion. I thought that there was a motion that needed to be made out of the planning commission, but since there was none, I would like to make a motion that the city council remand case 1708 to the planning commission for reconsideration of this project. And we will give the specifics on what the issues are that we would like them to take a look at it.
I think those have to be a part of the motion, do they not?
Okay, then height, density, and setback. And make sure that they're compliant with our ordinance.
Second. Was that RC? RC. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second, so let's have discussion.
I would like to, I wanted to ask some questions, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time for that as well. First of all, I'd like to ask Ms. Sitzman to come up and clarify some questions that I had at the committee meeting, and also subsequent questions that I also had that I think you have the expertise on. First of all, it was my understanding from the comprehensive plan that this area of flood plain originally was supposed to have been made into green space. That was part of the original comprehensive plan, and that it was going to be going all the way from Woodson to Beverly. And that's my understanding from what I read in the comprehensive plan. Can you clarify if that was in fact the case?
Sure. What you're referencing is several studies that were done leading up to the comprehensive planning dealing with how to deal with flooding throughout the city, and including that portion of the floodplain along Rock Creek and the area that you mentioned. There were several studies that were conducted that came up with potential solutions to the flooding issue. One of them was to return the creek channel to more natural conditions, so essentially daylight it, add additional space around it to allow it to flood without impacting people or property. That study was something that we were using at the time we developed the comprehensive plan. So the portion of our future land use map does identify a strip of green space through this general area, in addition to the, I believe it's medium density mixed use that's also identified there. A future land use map is not exactly parcel by parcel specific, so there's a little bit of fluctuation in where exactly that green strip might lay. This site does contain a portion of that kind of green strip, saying that if we were to daylight the creek, that would be where it should be, but it also contains a portion that says medium density mixed use. Now, over the years, the city council takes those kind of long range plans and then implements them through specific capital projects. We also followed up that with some additional engineering studies that laid out other options. Over the years, we've moved more towards an engineering solution that is not daylighting. So at this point, I would say the comprehensive plan is out of date.
So that was 10 years ago, basically. And it's really the comprehensive plan we're currently.
Right. It's not uncommon for comprehensive plans to become out of date over the years and have adjustments that need to be made to them.
The second question I have for you is I'd like you to clarify, maybe we can bring up the plat that we're looking at, the actual plan itself, whichever one you have. I think you have it with all the houses located nearby.
With the cover sheet on the plan, page 166, and then go backwards. I think the cover sheet has what Mr. Davis is probably wanting to see there.
Is that it? It wasn't right before it?
That one a little bit.
That one right there. I think that's it. It's my understanding, can you broaden that a little bit? Okay. The way that this, the plat is designed on the southern end, southwest end, there's a track that involves a channel over there, and that's designated as your property. And in fact, it's not your property.
Correct.
It actually belongs to the city, is that correct?
Yeah, that piece that right where it says the bottom track.
Right, the track A.
Yeah, it's off of our property line on the other drawings.
However, in all of the calculations that were done, it's my understanding that that area and the acreage of that area were included in the calculations.
I don't believe that's the case.
I believe it is.
Okay. It was, the calculation was based on the property line.
Well, let me ask Danielle.
Sorry.
So I think you're correct. We went back and read the description on the cover sheet. We think there is an error where they probably took the land area off of another document that did not subtract out tract A. We reran the calculations, so there's very little change to the density calculations that were requested as part of their preliminary site plan. So it really does not have an effect on their request.
It's a decimal.
Right, and
of acre.
Right, and it doesn't change the substantially what the planning commission considered when they were presented with that information.
Okay, but it does change the denominator.
It does change some of the points after the decimal, yes.
Okay, those are the questions I had for you. Thank you very much.
Would you like me to remain and just?
I had a question. Okay. Danielle, I had a question about the setbacks and as it pertains to 405090F, which discusses that the reduction of setbacks or other open space shall be compensated by additional open space and other appropriate portions of the project. Now, I don't know if this is better suited to you or the developer, but where are we getting the additional open space in the project?
So a couple of things there. I think when we talk about open space, I don't know that that's exactly the deviations that are being requested. There are buffer strips that need to have deviations requested for them that are required between parking areas. In my mind, that's not really a usable green space ever. So whether you're deviating from a 4-foot strip of grass down to a less than 4-foot strip of grass, I'm not sure that that's really the intent of that code to consider usable green spaces. And I think as you read that, it also says something towards the end of that, where reasonably possible. Can you, Ms. Flores?
Yeah, it says reduction of setbacks or other open space, so it has setbacks or other open space, shall be compensated by additional open space and other appropriate portions of the project.
Yeah, so under the appropriate portions of the property, I think as was brought up, in a plan district, you look at the whole package, and so it's not necessarily always going to have an appropriate place for those things. Certainly we considered those when we thought about it, but looking at the design of the building, we didn't think that reserving areas for those things was appropriate in the design of the project.
Okay, so in your view, it isn't compensated by other space because it doesn't need to be?
That would be my position.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Mr. Arnold some questions if that's possible. Mr. Arnold, thank you for coming, and I know that your company has a very good reputation, and I appreciate the fact that you're interested in investing in this community, so thank you for that. I had quite a bit of confusion because I'm new to the council, and I was going back through the minutes of the two planning commission meetings. And there was a lot of confusion in my mind, and I kept trying to read through this, about the height of the platform, the podium. Okay? If you can bring the elevation, the picture of the elevation. Okay. Yeah, and if you can sort of enlarge the elevation. And maybe you can go through this a little bit with us, because the elevation on here, I believe it's, 15'6", is that right?
So there's 17 feet to the top of the first floor structure.
Okay.
Right here. The top of the bottom of the podium slab is really just the thickness of the structure itself, concrete.
Okay.
And the required clearance for the fire department access is the 13.6.
That's what I was confused about.
Scan over just a tiny bit, please. You can kind of see that 13.6. That'll be.
Sorry, no.
Yeah, sorry. It's on the front of the building. There we go. Yeah. So there's the 13.6.
Okay.
And then the top of the structure is 17 feet.
So we have the fire marshal here as well, so I'll have him talk a little bit. But my question was that a lot of the comments, and I think probably were responding from memory, some were saying 18 foot, and some were saying 20 foot. And I was trying to figure out what is the true height of this.
Yeah, it's at 17 right there.
Okay.
Yeah, and we met with Todd, and he gave us the dimension requirements, and so we just included them and worked them into the plan.
Okay. My concern is that much of the argument for the height, even the 67-foot height, was the fire marshal's requirement. Now, I can tell you that if it weren't for the fire trucks having to go under that, what would be the height of the platform?
It would probably just be the requirement for the cars below. We have some commercial space that we have over on this side that we try to maintain a reasonable height for the office space of like a 9 foot, and then you start to kind of add in ductwork and drainage and all those things.
But that wouldn't affect the fire lane?
No, I'm just, you're saying if the
Just
fire lane
talking
wasn't
about
there.
to meet the fire department, you made arguments in your presentation, even back as far as September 15th, that the height of the building, the 67 feet, was, the cause of that was the fire requirements for the height and the floodplain.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that where it started was really just trying to figure out how to deal with the floodplain issue and getting the building, because to back up a little bit, when we first met with the city back in June of 16, the original plan was to renovate these into office buildings. Basically take the original buildings, renovate them. Once we got into it, because they are in the floodplain, they can't be renovated. So then it starts to be kind of, the snowball starts to roll. It's like, okay, can't renovate what's there, can't build what's, tear those down and build something in those footprints, so we have to get out of the floodplain. Right. So that's kind of the starting point. So how do we do that? And then we start figuring out how to get out of the floodplain by elevating all the structure. When we were trying to figure out the height of that, we had more office space shown on the first level. And so if you look at like a 10-foot ceiling or a 9-foot ceiling in the office and then start layering the structure up. I think originally when we very first started talking about the project, we did have a slightly higher podium. But then when we started really getting into the structure thicknesses and hired the structural engineer to calculate all that stuff, we were able to start bringing it back down. Originally we just had the comment that relates to the fire equipment was originally this line used to be more consistent and it went across, and when we met with Todd they said, okay, we need to push that up. But really what we did was we were able to push that up into a couple of select areas without moving that second floor podium height.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, the answer is in part my question. Okay. I guess I was having trouble with your argument. Oh, okay. That basically the reason for the height of the building was because the fire code requirement.
It's really just those access points to get, to service the back of the building.
So I really think that in terms of the overall height, when you're talking about 56 feet 3 inches, 67 feet, even if you didn't have the fire requirements, you still would, the height was not dictated by the fire truck.
No, it's really just creating if we're going to have some ground floor space and then getting the building, the majority of the building out of all the built structure out of that floodplain.
So I can understand the cars underneath, I can understand the parking.
Yeah, it's not the fire department's fault. No.
Okay.
I mean, there are other buildings that are built, I think Mission Trails has much less access to the back of the building. Really, the reason that we don't have access is because Rock Creek is there and there's 2 office buildings on either side. So that's kind of when, it happened a little bit further into the project when they said we really would like access to the back of the building. And that's when we created these kind of carve-out notches so that they could get in there.
There are a couple of other things that have to do with the fire code. As I understand it, and perhaps Todd, you could allude to this as well. It's my understanding that the fire lane, if it's longer than 150 feet, then it has to have a turnaround underneath the building.
Right.
And that if it's not more than 150 feet, there's no requirement for turnaround.
Okay.
So by having the setbacks eliminated all the way, you have a 25-foot setback in the back. You've totally eliminated that because you built all the way out to the channel. You have to have a 20-foot wide lane. Potentially, you could have fire lanes coming around the back if you didn't have the setback. And it could be shorter than 150 feet on either side of the building. And therefore you wouldn't have to have the turnaround.
Okay. We were able to, we took the turning radiuses that were required and have incorporated those so that they can maneuver vehicles all underneath the building.
I understand.
Okay.
But well, I guess my argument is that when I go back to this whole issue of the height of the building regarding the fire trucks and the turnaround needing the west setbacks moved out, right? and that's all part of this project. It's all contingent on the height of the fire trucks. It's contingent on the turnaround lane, when in fact, the fact that you have the setbacks eliminated in the back, you could have a 20-foot lane that goes behind the building if you didn't have those setbacks removed.
Right, we would still want access to it. So that's where these little drive-throughs get to, because there's two buildings on either side in the rock. The reason, if it had an alley behind it or something, that wouldn't be issues. They wouldn't need that right under the front of the building.
Well, I thought that it was a lame argument, personally, for the height.
Mr. Davis, I think you asked the question. I think he said the fire codes are not requiring this design. I know you stated that, right? So you're capitulating to Mr. Davis's argument.
Correct. Yeah,
okay.
we incorporated their request that they made into these access points at 2 points.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, the only other question I have before I'll make further comments is, given what you've heard tonight, and given the motion that's on the table, would it be in your interest to withdraw this project for further study, or do you want to go ahead and have us have a vote on this motion?
Well, I would like to maybe offer a little bit of
and you had said you wanted to make a few clarifications.
Just a couple clarifications, because I think that would kind of shed some light. There were some concerns that were made about apartments in general. I think that there is a little bit of a stigma associated with most rental units. It's kind of a population that is shifted towards single-family homes. It's hard to understand this renter by choice mentality. There are a lot of people that just don't want houses, whether they're younger, they want the mobility, the flexibility. The millennials, kind of get thrown into that a lot, or senior, much like we saw with Mission Square project. There are a lot of people. Most projects that we work on, it's usually a very diverse demographic that comes in there. People that are here tonight that love their single-family homes, they want to stay in this amazing city. They want to be able to walk, but they don't really want to paint and do yard work and all the upkeep. So they often end up migrating into a product like this as a solution. The housing crisis of years ago taught us all that our homes that we own isn't maybe the best investment that we could possibly make. So people have kind of looked at that much more balanced in terms of renter by choice. Delivering a Class A high quality project like what we're proposing is that demographic. It is higher rents. It's kind of matching much of the quality project that you're seeing in most cities. When you reduce that density and you go to something that's more, a version like I could just dream up right now would be, okay, tear the existing buildings down, build up out of that floodplain, just on shorter podiums, not park under it, and just do normal walk-up style apartments. That would work. It would be way less expensive, but it would also probably be lower rents, and it might not be the exact demographic that some of the people that are living on 61st Street are concerned about. So that's why we really are trying to push to get a really, really high quality project in here. The cost to do that podium structure that we're proposing is about $2.5 million, $2.8 million. So when we look at spreading that out over unit cost, that's the game that we're playing right now. Originally, we were going to be associating about $16,000 per unit to cover that cost. Now we're at $21,000 per unit to cover that cost of that structure. So if it gets lower, it really won't work. So then the alternative would be to just go back in with kind of more typical walk-up, no elevator access. So then it really eliminates the possibility for this to be a good senior living solution. It really just puts a lot of handcuffs on what the potential could be here. There were some questions about micro apartments. I think someone just started that rumor. These aren't micro apartments.
What is a micro?
A micro apartment typically, like in most cities on the coast, is like 300 square feet per unit. The Mission, I think Danielle mentioned, does Mission allow? Mission allows micro units, 300 square feet. We're not proposing this. We have a few studios that are 500 square feet, so there's no micro apartments. I think that just kind of was dreamed up somewhere. There's some concerns about the setbacks. I get it, the 25 feet. We exceeded the setbacks by threefold on one side of the building to 75 feet, thinking that where we're closest to the home, the woman that mentioned that lives there, we pulled the building back 75 feet instead of just maxing it out at 25 feet. So we thought that that was a good thing to do, but that kind of pushed the other side of the building that's furthest away from everybody up to that limit. We could certainly move the building closer to her lot and still be, we could move it 50 feet closer and still be within the setback, and push the other one back. So that's something that we could probably work through in final plan submittal. We were just trying to be as generous as possible to that one resident that we were up close to. We are increasing green space. We're planting, I think, 20 trees along the back side of the building. There's currently 2 big trees on the front of the building. So we're wildly increasing the amount of planted space, a lot of buffer landscape that's going along the back of the building. So we like the park. We're trying to extend the park onto our property and further enhance that. I think that I was just trying to clarify a few of the things that were confused.
Mr. Davis posed a question. What your question?
Okay, so yes, I mean, I think this project won't work if we go back and say, okay, we're going to take a floor off, and now it's a 2-story building on top of a $2.5–3 million structure. It won't work. It's barely working now. We're trying to figure out other ways to cut costs. We still really want to deliver a high-quality steel frame building versus a lot of the large wood frame buildings that are built for apartments. That comes at a premium. We see this as our civic responsibility, the fact that it's near the pool and City Hall, to try to do as nice of a project as possible. It won't work to do if it got lower, so probably what we would have to come back with would be an entirely different project with more of a typical 3-story on the ground, built up on a plinth, and lower density, no elevator, kind of a typical apartment project. We'd really not prefer to do that because of where it's at, but that's probably just the way the economics will work out.
So was that a no to my question?
Respectfully, yes, that's a no.
Okay. So I guess the motion's on the table. It's been seconded.
Well,
the motion's on the table, correct?
Or any other discussion? Yes, if I could.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to, first off, thank all you people for coming out here, coming to the meeting. Especially want to thank the people who got up and spoke, because that's not easy. I get nervous myself talking at these meetings, so I know it's not an easy thing to do. But definitely appreciate the feedback. One of you people, one of the ladies mentioned the spirit of the community, and I think that's a very important thing. And they made reference, several people did, to the planners, the original city planners who laid these things out, laid out the codes originally. And we do have codes there in place. If we want to build a project, at least in my opinion, that is that much of a variance from what's in the plan, or what's in the code, then you need to see about changing the code. And if that goes and people do that, then you can move forward with it. But the way this one is, and I appreciate what Kevin said, being a business owner, I want to see development and growth here in Mission too, and I do want to see some more density. And we are landlocked, it does have to go up. But at this particular location, people brought up some great points about the parks and about the houses. Too many variances, too many changes here. So I will be supporting the motion to send this back to council. I'm going to send it back to the planning commission.
All right. Any other discussion? Yes.
I just have one additional comment, which is that I will also be supporting the proposal to send this back to the planning commission. But I wanted to make it clear that I'm not saying that I necessarily think all of these, or even any of these deviations, need to be removed. I just don't think we have the record before us on the factors that 405-090 requires under sub E, sub F, and sub G. I'm counting up 14 different factors, and I didn't see a lot of discussion or evidence on that in front of the Planning Commission, so I just think we need to give it another look.
Any other discussion?
I just have a question about pervious versus impervious parking in the parking lot. We're working with the Sustainability Commission. We have a chair back here. Have you looked at options for the possibility for pervious versus impervious parking?
No, we haven't. We have looked at that. We have used that on other projects. A lot of times where it makes the most sense is where there's a lot of exposed lots, because the building is covering most of our parking. It would probably not make a lot of sense because most of the water is going to be caught on the roof of the building and taken down through drains, so it really doesn't even touch the parking.
We do have an interceptor that goes down Johnson Drive, but we don't have it in Marway. I just wonder how that would impact. And we used to have an engineer on board that would speak on behalf of it.
Yeah, I mean, what exists right now is it's, almost all paved or built out. So when we did the calculations, we have more green space now than what exists over there.
Just one more comment. I heard loud and clear what the community is stating. And these people have been here through hell and high water with this city. When the streets were closed for a year, they've gone through a lot with this city and with this council. I've been on here 19 years. And I just want to preface my comment by saying, because somebody wants it, it doesn't have to be here. The people who have bought homes in this area and lived here for years and years and keeping those property values up, and all of them are gone up again this year, are the rationale for people like me staying on this council. And I fully respect what they're saying, and I will be voting to remain with that also.
I think it's a great city. I mean, that's why we came here. We thought that it was a great location for a project like this. We thought that, spending $20 million to make some old, broken down buildings would be well received. I think through the entire process, it was all very well received. I understand that there's the residents along 61st Street are concerned about the height. Like I said, we're trying to create a Class A building, Class A residence, but we may not be able to here. I'd say there was a question about green space. If anyone wants to come buy this from me, I would gladly take an offer to turn it into a park. I think that would be fantastic. But I don't see anybody stepping up to do that. So. Because we have bought it, we have worked through this process very diligently now for 18 months. We can continue on. It may just be a compromise at the end of the day.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I was wondering in your motion you talked about the density concerns. I think that's something that I personally am not so concerned about. I think with the nature of the housing that's being built today, we're going to have to see more density in some of the properties. So. If the motion is going to include that clause as well, I don't think I can support amending that back. But if you're willing to change that, I'd be open to remain. I do have concerns about the height and the setbacks, but I don't think that the density thing is going to be something that can really come into play here. Just with the nature of what the housing market or rental market is demanding right now.
Do you want to make an amendment?
Yes, that would be the process, right?
Yeah.
So I would like to amend.
You can make a motion to amend.
I would like to make a motion to amend Councilmember Davis's motion to not include the remand with the restriction on density.
Is there a second?
I have a clarification point. When we talked about density changing, do you have a percentage that you want to change to?
Well,
let's have a second, and then we'll have discussion. Okay. So, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. So, go ahead.
I'd just like clarity in terms of, for purposes of modifying the density requirement, what are you looking at?
The density is a standard. I believe it's 38 units per acre. Is that correct?
It's 35.
35.
Times 1.77.
Per acre. So that comes out to about 60.
62 apartments.
60 apartments.
62.
Well, it depends on what the acreage is that you.
That's true.
So it's about 60 apartments. So basically, I think this will take care of density, to be honest with you. I don't know. Maybe you can tell us how your modified plan would alter density in the building.
I have no idea. Yeah. Just because the concrete podium would go away, it'd be a totally.
I guess my only argument is that I'm asking for our standards to be met. That's all that I'm asking for. And so my thought is that if there's a modification in the plan, density will take care of itself just as it did when they lowered the floor in the second time around. So I would argue, I guess I'm arguing against your amendments.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, Martha, please call the roll on the motion.
Okay.
This is on the amendment.
On the amendment.
A motion on the table.
Inman,
Nay.
Flora,
Nay.
Davis,
Nay.
Thomas,
Nay.
Kring,
Nay.
Quinn,
Nay.
Rothrock,
Nay.
Schlesmacher.
Yay.
Motion fails.
All right, so that motion is gone, so the original motion is on the table. Any more discussion on the original motion?
I just had some comments to make, and I don't know if it's part of the discussion. I think, in my opinion, redevelopment, and this is for staff as well as probably for the planning commission, redevelopment in boundary areas that are adjacent to R1, I think have to be adhere to the standard a lot more than other areas where it's further away from R1 boundaries. And we, in our current MS2 standards and ordinance, the flexibility is allowed by the planning commission and it's allowed by the council. And we have no policy, no overt policy that says that in boundary areas next to R1, we should be more stringent with our flexibility. And I think that that's something that possibly we need to go back and look at and make that as a policy issue.
Could I ask to have that motion read again, please?
The original motion, he moved that they remand case 1708 to the Planning Commission for reconsideration of height, density, and setback.
So it's just reconsideration, doesn't mean there won't be.
Yeah, and that's, I was gonna say, that's my comment as well with Councilman Quinn's, that I just, again, wanted to clarify that by sending it back, I'm not saying that any of these things should or shouldn't come back in front of us, just that I want the planning commission to give the factors that are set out in the ordinance that goes forward.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Arnold, thank you so much. Mr. Arnold, thank you so much for coming. Sorry about your and thank you to the neighbors who came out tonight, definitely. I can't remember which of you propositioned us to drive by your houses and park out in front of the park, and I spent some time doing that, and I don't think that the vegetation currently is doing Mr. Arnold any favors as far as there not being much barrier. And that's a huge piece of me thinking that there's not enough evidence that this isn't going to adversely affect the neighborhood. And thank you guys for coming out and sharing your sentiments.
All right, you have a motion on the table. Martha, please call roll.
Flora.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
Inman.
Aye.
Kring.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Schlesmacher.
Nay.
Thomas.
Aye.
Rothrock.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, next item on our agenda is another item from the Planning Commission. It is 5B, Special Use Permit 5655 Broadmoor Street, East Simpson, please brief us.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to give folks a moment if they'd like to leave in the next agenda item before you tonight is another case from the Planning Commission. It's case 1713. It's a special use permit for off-site parking at 5655 Broadmoor Street. If that address isn't familiar to you, it's because it's just been made up by me. This is a site that has been for a long time a surface parking lot. Came to the city's attention that it was purchased in 2015 by an ownership that also owns the Mission Towers building at 5700 Broadmoor Street. They came to us with a request for a building permit to make some site improvements. That's the point at which we were made aware that they were basically going to be using this site for off-site parking. That means that their use is not immediately adjacent, it's across the street from this site. Off-site parking is not an allowable use in a zoning district where this is located, and is actually a use that's specifically called out as needing a special use permit. So we made the applicant aware of that, and they have brought before you, before the Planning Commission and you this evening, a plan for doing that. They did submit site plans showing how they intend to improve it. In addition to site lighting, they also would be installing a sidewalk and a crosswalk to accommodate pedestrians, people who are parking in this parking lot and getting across the street to where they're going to work. Also some street trees, landscaping and screening of the parking lot, and as I said, lighting, which would be bollard style lights. Those are the things that are not very tall. They look like posts. They have lighting integrated into them. The applicant worked through that process with us. They complied with any requests that we had for changes to their plans. The parking lot would accommodate 86 parking stalls, whereas today it is 117 parking stalls. The new plan would be in compliance with our current code. The old existing parking lot is not. There are some aspects of that lot over the years that we've noticed that we thought were a nuisance and we've told them to eliminate. I believe there was a basketball hoop there at one point for employees to shoot hoops. That was a little bit disturbing to the neighbors that are on just the east side of that property, so we've made that a condition that that goes away. There is also a privacy fence that's been installed along this property to screen it and Broadmoor Park from the adjacent neighborhood, but that would remain. So, included in the Planning Commission's recommendation for approval were several conditions, 4 conditions. The first condition really just limits the use to parking for vehicles to support the daily employee parking needs of the adjacent high-rise building. There's a condition in there basically setting a deadline for the development of the parking lot. It took them a while to get to full submittal for your consideration tonight. We'd like to see them just continue on at this pace rather than have it linger much longer. There's also a requirement for dedication of right-of-way. As I said, they'll be installing some sidewalks. We took a look at their lot. It's never been platted, so we would need them to go through that process and designate the parts of their lot that would become public. So eventually you will see a plat for this property as well. That's the area in which they would be building those sidewalks in our public right-of-way. We looked at where this lot is in relationship to the form-based code, making sure that they're giving us enough of that right-of-way so that in the future full complete development of a street in a way that would be compliant with the form-based code could happen. So it's basically just ensuring that in the future this lot's already set up for proceeding with that kind of development. As I said, there's a condition to plat that right-of-way. And then finally, the exact details of where the crosswalk would happen are still kind of in design with our engineers. We were hammering out the exact location where it would be safest to happen. Regardless of where the crosswalk ends up being, there'll be sidewalk connecting the parking lot to the crosswalk to the building. Just one more thing. So again, the Planning Commission did recommend approval of the site plan with those conditions. That's all.
Is there a term limit to the permit, special use permit?
Special use permits generally run with the use. There is a way to revoke a special use permit once it's been issued. In this case, we've actually put a deadline on the development that's more of an end to, if they don't do it within the deadline that we set of November of this year, then they'd have to come back to make improvements anyway. But generally, a special use permit goes on with whatever the use is, not the ownership. But once you say it's okay to be parking, it doesn't matter who owns it, as long as it's parking, it's okay. But there are parts of our ordinances that allow us to revoke a special use if, for example, conditions in the neighborhood change and it would no longer be appropriate for the special use to continue.
Thanks, I was just curious.
Could you explain that a little more, what the change of conditions were, given that it's zoned for something else now?
Sure. So we've had, I think the ordinance just basically says if conditions change and is no longer appropriate, then you can revoke a special use permit. There are some other conditions in there, like if the applicant doesn't hold up their requirements or things like that. We've had one special use permit in recent history that we issued and then revoked later. It was for a donation center to be established, so people donating clothing or furniture or something like that, that they could do it if they developed their site with the site plan that we submitted. That applicant never proceeded to establish a donation center, and in the meantime, additional housing was built nearby, and then we took a look at that special use permit and said, you know what, if the housing had been there when they'd asked, we wouldn't have granted this. We don't think that's okay, compatible use at this point, so we proceeded, the city council proceeded to revoke the special use permit in that case. That's an example.
I would entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move the City Council uphold the recommendation of the Planning Commission for approval of the special use permit for 5655 Broadmoor Street with the conditions noted and adopt an ordinance authorizing certain property within the city of Mission, Kansas to be used for or occupied by a special use.
I would like to second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for roll, please.
Flora,
Aye.
Inman,
Aye.
Kring,
Aye.
Quinn,
Aye.
Rothrock,
Aye.
Schlossmacher,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you. Next up are our committee reports. Councilmember Schlossmacher, would you please provide a report on the Finance and Administration Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have one item on our Finance and Administration Committee to report this evening. That's item number 6A, about the Mission Magazine Holiday Adoption Program Coordination. Mission has several programs and projects that distinguish us from other cities, not only in the Johnson County area, but throughout the whole metro area. These include the Mission Magazine and Holiday Adoption Programs. Susie Gibbs was instrumental in the formation of both, and during her tenure as a city council member, assumed the primary responsibility for their management, coordination, and promotion. Ms. Gibbs has expressed her willingness to continue to serve in a similar capacity, ensuring the city is able to maintain consistency and continuity for these programs, and to assist in the transition. A job description has been developed for this position, which will be compensated in the amount of $250 per month to account for time, travel, and other expenses associated with program administration. This position would be considered an independent contractor. Mayor, I move the City Council approve a contract with Susie Gibbs to manage, document, and prepare to transition the coordination of both the Mission Magazine and the Holiday Adoption Programs.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Is there a term for this contract?
There is not a term for this contract at this time.
Usually most of our contracts have a term associated with them. Is this going to be, I mean, are we going to revisit this each year, or how is that going to work?
I believe the contract's going to have a 30-day out clause for either party. Is that correct? And I think the intent of this is to ensure the sustainability of these programs and transition.
Most of our contracts have a term associated with them. If you don't, if it's one, that's okay, but I just.
Yeah, I think with the 30-day out clause on either party side, I think that'd be sufficient.
And I do envision at least an annual report by whoever runs the programs in front of council to talk about what they've done and what they're going to do in the next year. And so I guess at that time, if we feel that it has not lived up to whatever expectations we have that option. So I don't, yeah.
And I just had one further comment kind of along those lines. I had brought up at our committee meetings, but wanted to reiterate that this was discussed. I think these are great programs and we need to ensure that they continue, and Susie's done a lot of great work on them. But I want to make sure, and I didn't feel like it was reflected in the job description, that this will include transitioning the programs to ensure for their continuity. And so I just wanted to get on the record that I think that that's an important component of creating this position.
Do you want that in the job description, though?
I just wanted it to be reflected that that was part of the intent of establishing this position, and I thought it wasn't reflected in the job description. So
I don't think it belongs in the job description because this job description just needs to fit whoever comes along next. But I do believe that that's expressed in the action item, that the intent,
and the motion, I believe.
and the motion. So I believe it's covered, but I don't see it belonging in the job description. Any other discussion? Hearing none, please call roll.
Davis.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
Rothrock.
Aye.
Inman.
Aye.
Flora.
Aye.
Kring.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Schlesmacher.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Does that conclude your report?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that concludes our Finance and Administration Committee reports.
All right, let's move on to community development. Ms. Inman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We only have one item tonight. It's the 2018 Farmers Market schedule. Last November, Council held a work session to review the Farmers Market performance for the 2017 season. Vendor and customer attendance in 2017 was similar to previous years, but lower than expectations established at the beginning of 2017. Growth of the market has been slower than anticipated due to a variety of reasons, including availability of organic and local produce in grocery stores, competitions with other Saturday markets and other weekend obligations, the availability of home delivery, and community-sponsored eggs, and a relatively lower number of vendors compared to other markets. Discussions at November work session included the possibility of moving the market to Thursday evenings. This was again discussed at the January and February committee meetings, and the committee also expressed the desire to include more food trucks and a possibility of a beer garden at a Thursday evening market. 4:30 to 8 p.m. from June through September. Following formal approval of the new market schedule for 2018, staff will move ahead with recruitment of vendors and publicize the new market schedule. Mayor, I move the City Council approve the schedule for the 2018 Mission Farm and Flower Market for Thursdays, June through September, from 4:30 to 8 p.m.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
As a semi-regular volunteer at the market, I want to see this Thursday night succeed more than anybody else. Not more than anybody else, not more than anyone. But I can't help but be a little bit hesitant just in the lack of secured vendors for Thursday night. And I know we kind of have to set the schedule and then explore vendors, but I'm somewhat concerned about just not solidified plans for our vendors. On top of that, after talking to a handful of different Ward 1 residents that were concerned about not having a Saturday market. Obviously, everyone wants to see the Thursday market, but a lot of people are going to be missing the Saturday market, as will I. I just want to throw in my thoughts and see if anyone else shares my sentiments.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I would agree. I really enjoy the Saturday markets. It's been great to go down there, but I also know that we've had a lot of concerns with keeping that going. More than anything, I would hate to see the market just completely fold after another season of more declining attendance, both from vendors and patrons. So, I think it's worth a shot at this. Kind of conflicted on it, but I think it's worth a shot at trying to see if we can promote some more activity down there, bring out some more people, maybe capture some of the after-work crowd that's leaving the offices Thursday evening. Doesn't necessarily live in Mission, but might stop and grab some produce and stuff for the weekends, or maybe stop and have a beer. I think it's worth trying it. You can always look at next year, adjusting again if need be. It's a good move to try to go ahead and strengthen the market.
I think we need to explore this new idea, boldly go where no market has gone before.
I have similar apprehension, and I will miss the Saturday market. I did have an occasion to speak with somebody over at Twisted Sisters who didn't know that it was being moved to Thursday and was thoroughly excited about it because she's an art person who was interested in having a booth to sell her art. And so she was very excited, and I gave her Emily's name, and she called her within minutes of that conversation. So.
All right, any other discussion?
One other thing I'd like to add. I would like to see maybe more Saturday morning impromptu events to maybe supplement for some of those folks that are going to be missing out on the market. So maybe once a month or once every 2 months, we do something where people that like that Saturday morning feel, like myself, have a place to go that they can walk to. And That's all. Just went back to the room.
All right. Anything else? Hearing none, please call roll.
Thomas,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Schlesmacher,
Aye.
Rothrock,
Aye.
Quinn,
Aye.
Kring,
Aye.
Inman,
Aye.
Flora.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mayor, that concludes the CDC report.
Thank you. Next, we're on to unfinished business, which we do not have any this evening, so we are on to new business. We have 3 items under new business. With recent changes to the governing body, we have several positions that need to be filled. We will begin with council selecting the council vice president, followed by our committee vice chair positions. So first is the council vice president. The individual elected to the position of council vice president will serve until April of 2019. I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would nominate Councilman Pat Quinn for the position of... Oh, I thought he was president. Oh, I'm sorry.
You're just being thrown.
I thought you were the vice president. Sorry about that.
No, thank you.
Then I withdraw my motion. Or I can modify it. Are there any sub-nominations? I guess that's what I was looking for.
Mayor, I nominate Kristen Inman for the position of council vice president for a term expiring April 2019.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any other nominations?
Actually, yes,
Okay.
if I could. I had talked to her ahead of time, but I would like to nominate Debbie Crane for the position. Position of Vice President of City Council to expire April 2019.
We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We have 2 nominations. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, how do we handle this vote, Martha?
Do we have to accept the nominations?
Yeah.
It'd be
I
easy.
believe
Let me denounce mine.
Yeah.
Renounce or denounce?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
All right, we rejected the motion.
Yes.
Debbie's withdrawn her name from
Okay.
consideration as council vice president.
So therefore, I withdraw the motion.
Okay, I guess we're back to
With the
one.
consent of the second.
With the consent of the-
There you
okay.
go.
So we have 1 nominee left. Anybody else?
Well, let me try.
Hearing none, please call roll.
Okay. Davis,
Aye.
Schlesmacher,
Aye.
Rothrock,
Aye.
Quinn,
Aye.
Flora,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
Inman,
Aye.
Kring. Motion carries. Congratulations.
All right. Next, we've got selection of our Finance and Administration Committee Vice Chair. This individual elected would serve in that position until June of 2018. I would entertain a motion.
Mayor, I nominate Councilmember Ken Davis for the position of Finance and Administration Committee Vice Chairperson for a term expiring in May of 2018?
June of 18.
June of 18.
I'll second that motion.
Sorry, if I'm wrong. I'm sorry.
We have a motion and a second. Any other nominations? Hearing none, Martha, please call roll.
Thomas,
Aye.
Rothrock,
Aye.
Flora,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Inman,
Aye.
Kring,
Aye.
Schlesmacher,
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
All right, moving on. Number 9, comments from the City Council. This is an opportunity for...
Wait,
Oh, wait, we got
CDC.
Got one more to do.
Oh, I'm sorry. One more. Next is our Community Development Committee Vice Chair. This individual will also serve until June of 18. I would entertain a motion.
Second. Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor, I nominate only for the position.
We just elected you.
I'm just overwhelmed with emotion.
We have a second. We have a motion and a second. Any other nominees? Hearing none, please call roll.
Schlesmacher,
Aye.
Quinn,
Aye.
Rothrock,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
Kring,
Aye.
Inman,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Flora.
Aye.
All right, now we're moving on to item number 9. Comments from the City Council. This is an opportunity for members of the council to share something with us. Anybody have anything to share?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Actually, it's not just myself, but Ward 1, we're going to have the Ward 1 meeting, if there's any Ward 1 people out here. And I don't know, how are we advertising that or promoting that?
We've got it on Facebook. We've got it on
The website.
It's in the
magazine.
Word of mouth.
It's listed in the magazine, which will be in homes this week.
And that's going to be on March 1st.
Oh, yeah. 7 o'clock at Western House.
7 o'clock.
March 1st?
Anything else for the body?
Shout out, I do this often to John Belcher, shout out, thank you for all the hefty road work.
I'm just glad it's not on a weekend or a holiday.
I know, let's try to keep that trend up.
Plan all the snowstorms accordingly.
Thank you very much.
All right, nothing else. Next, we'll go on to the mayor's report. This evening, we have several appointments to consider. For our commissions, with the recent retirement of Don Shamlin, we need to appoint a new city treasurer. So Jim Brown, so do we have a motion on the city treasurer?
Mayor, I move that City Council uphold the appointment of Debbie Long as city treasurer.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the appointment of Debbie Long as city treasurer? Hearing none, please call roll.
Kring.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Schlesmacher.
Aye.
Flora.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Rothrock.
Aye.
Inman.
Aye.
All right, next appointment is to our planning commission. Jim Brown recently stepped down from the planning commission after serving for many years, and we thank him for his service. This appointment will fill Jim's unexpired term. I put before you the appointment of Pete Christensen, Ward 4, to the planning commission with a term expiring December 31st, 2019. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the City Council uphold the appointment of Pete Christensen to the Planning Commission with a term expiring December 31st, 2019.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Before we have discussion, Pete's in the audience. Maybe if you could come up for a second, Pete, as long as you're here. And I guess if this is voted on and it's approved, you're going to get right in the middle of the Markway project. So
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you.
Okay, tell us where you live and how you got to Mission.
So I live at 4800 West 61st Mission, Terrace Mission.
Which is behind the Highlands area?
Mission Village area,
Okay.
I believe. I moved down here for a job. I've done internships here and on the East Coast and realized that I was a Midwest kid at heart. I'm originally from Des Moines, Iowa. My dad has served on planning commission and boards in West Des Moines, Iowa. So I understand what it takes to make a city run efficient and what it truly means to have a good city. And I'm just looking forward to be able to get back to my city and help grow within the community and help the community grow as well.
What do you do?
I'm a mechanical engineer.
Iowa State fan, I hope.
Iowa State.
So your degree is in construction engineering?
My degree is in construction engineering with an emphasis in mechanical engineering, and I also have a minor in energy systems.
Good.
I'm glad to be there.
All right.
Thank you.
So we have any discussion on this appointment? Hearing none, please call roll.
Flora.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Rothrock.
Aye.
Inman.
Aye.
Kring. Davis.
Aye.
Schlesmacher.
Aye.
Thank you.
Our next appointment is for a position on the Parks, Recreation, and Tree Commission. I put before you the appointment of Amy Burks, Ward 4, to the Parks, Recreation, and Tree Commission with the term expiring December 31st, 2019. Do I hear a motion?
Mayor, I move that the City Council uphold the appointment of Amy Burks to the Parks and Recreation and Tree Commission with a term expiring December 31st, 2019.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call roll.
Quinn.
Aye.
Rothrock.
Aye.
Kring.
Aye.
Inman.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Flora.
Aye.
Schlesmacher. Davis.
Aye.
All right, moving on. We have a city administrator's report. Ms. Smith, do you have anything for the city?
Just two things very briefly. We will not have a meeting next week, so you get the week off. So we'll see you again on March 7th for committee meetings. And then if you haven't already done so, if you would please RSVP to Martha for the Comacora training that the DA's office is putting on at the end of March. We would appreciate that. It's highly recommend that. It will be in the evening. It's a great opportunity to just hear the rules of Comacora and to have your questions answered in a group setting where someone else is likely to ask the question you would like to. So that's all I have to say.
All right. We have a need for a 15-minute executive session this evening to discuss current litigation. City Administrator Laura Smith and City Attorney Dave Martin would attend. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I move the City Council adjourn to executive session to discuss current litigation pursuant to exception for consultation with an attorney on matters deemed privileged. KSA 5-4219. Also attending will be City Administrator Laura Smith, City Attorney David Martin. The open meeting will resume in council chambers at 9:17 by that clock.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call roll on that.
Inman.
Aye.
Flora.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Kring.
Aye.
Quinn.
Aye.
Rothrock.
Aye.
Schlesmacher.
Aye.
Thank you.
Get back at 9:17. Reflect, we're back from executive session. There being no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All right.